Good afternoon. Welcome back to the channel. This video is not financial advice, not financial advisor. Do your own research, make your own decisions. Okay, guys, welcome back. So, general ICP update. We'll be going over some important topics, but this will be different from my normal content because I'm going to be getting into some things with human psychology. Also, want to go into the medium people use to access certain information and why that's a very important factor. Also, weighted decision analysis. When you're trying to make an analysis and there's tons of variables and data points to assess, being able to categorize certain criteria based on overall importance so you're not overvaluing certain criteria and undervaluing other criteria that might be overwhelmingly more important to the analysis. Everything kind of flows together throughout the rest of this video, but I want to start with an example, just talking about the medium people use to access information and why that's so important. But I want to go over this quote first from Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message because it is the medium that shapes and controls the search and form of human associations and action. Now, any given person, if they want to learn more about what's happening in the world, let's just assume, for the sake of this example, they haven't figured out yet that the mainstream media is mostly just propaganda, but they're going to tune in to the mainstream media more times than not, right? Now, the facts, evidence, and data of things happening in the world are the same, but based on which medium they use to get this information, they might get a drastically different version of reality, right? And it's safe to say, on average, right, not talking about one-off scenarios, but on average, the person that watches Fox every day and the person that watches CNN every day are likely going to have very different perceptions and outlooks on what's happening in the world, right? Yeah. And if you think about how this works with the current media model, the media decides what stories are important and which stories are not important. There's not an open, transparent, scientific process that they use to figure out which stories should be covered based on overall importance. They just decide, hey, this is what is important to be talking about right now. And so they establish trending stories, and that becomes, in the minds of the masses, the most important things, whatever the media is discussing, right? And also, this applies not just to any given story, but general topics as well. And the default assumption becomes with the mind with most people that if there were these other stories that should be covered because they're more important than what they're talking about, somebody would be talking about it. There's all these media companies at the end of the day, somebody would be covering it, right? But these are private corporations with no system of checks and balances if they were misleading people. And coverage can be largely dictated based on the highest bidder. We've seen this numerous times with the media over the years and their sponsors and the people that, use their platform for advertising, how they oftentimes get favorable coverage, and just how so many of these media companies are owned by similar entities, right? And how they just coincidentally start reporting on things in a very similar way, pushing similar types of messaging. But they can largely shape and alter the way people see the world just by their coverage, just by focusing on certain things and not other things, by framing certain stories the way that they do. They can make people believe a certain version, their version of reality, right? Okay. So the truth that they're relaying to the public, and that becomes the truth to the public for a percentage of people, a decent percentage of people, this can largely be dictated by the highest bidder. Yeah. Now, let's compare and contrast how this works and how it works with X being the medium. And I'm going to post this on YouTube too. And to some degree, this applies to YouTube, but it's just more extreme on Twitter because everybody becomes a content creator. There's more interaction. Everything is just happening at a much faster pace. But start looking at X the same way you would as the mainstream media, as being the medium people are using to access certain information. Because the same way that any normal person, the medium they use for news, whichever media outlets they're using to get that information, the same way that's going to affect their perception, it affects people's perception that they're using X as their medium to get all the information they're getting about crypto. 100%. And look at all the parallels here. There's so many. So promoting certain accounts that cover certain topics and not others. You notice how certain topics are just become the most important thing to be discussing, even though nobody could make the case for why they're the most important things that are being discussed. Heavily promoting trading and leverage, heavily promoting meme coins and gambling, clickbait and engagement farming. All of these things get boosted to the moon, burying the main stories and topics while boosting irrelevant topics centered in drama. People can buy followers, buy their entire reach, right? Um, just the same way that the truth that the media relays to the public can really just be bought and sold from the highest bidder. Same concept on X. When people can buy followers and game the system, our experience on X as it relates to crypto content can be largely simulated. That's what's happened over the last few years. Same way that it happens with the mainstream media. The difference on X is that it is an open platform, whereas the mainstream media, it's that company and the content that they're putting out on their channel. But the difference would be on X, you do have the opportunity for smaller accounts and creators to cover certain topics, but all of this can still be gamed through algorithms and through promoting certain things and not promoting other topics of conversation. But content can be dictated based on the highest bidder, similar to the mainstream media. And initiatives can be coordinated behind the scenes with different people, normally resulting in insider trading. And this entire environment itself can largely be simulated. And once the systems are in place, so once all these things are in place on X or on some social media platform, at that point, it starts creating a lot of what I would call organic byproducts, people who just conform to the broader situation, the broader environment. Oh, well, everybody's talking about this. These are the things that are getting the most traction. So now I'm incentivized to talk about this, post about this, have my attention and focus in these areas because those are the things that are being promoted on this platform, right? And so creating the system itself creates a lot of byproducts that just further contribute to this being the way things are on X as it relates to crypto content. Now, I just wanted to go over that to start. And I will go into this a little bit more just as it relates to human psychology and people kind of conforming to the environment around them. Because for the outlook that I have with ICP right now and everything with this tech moving forward, this is the most optimistic setup I could have ever imagined. And week by week, month by month, it's just becoming more and more ideal. This is the most perfect setup ever. I don't know how else to say that. The two things that people go back to are price and what everybody is saying, but those two things have been the same this entire time. What's been changing is everything else. Everything else you would want to see change if all this was going to continue to move forward. Price and what everybody's saying has been the same ever since the beginning. That hasn't changed. What's been changing is everything else that people haven't been paying attention to. In my general case would be the medium people are using to access certain information is largely warping their perception of what's going on, and it's preventing them from being able to see the stars aligning perfectly for this entire situation, for all this tech continuing to move forward, because they're looking in the wrong areas and they're having their attention directed in the wrong areas based on the medium that they're using to access information. Same concept here. And so many parallels and overlaps with how these systems work. Now, let's thought experiment really quick. The thesis for ICP was already in place by the time Eric Schmidt gave this talk at Stanford last year. So I think this was in the fall of 2024. And this was a big aha moment for me because when I watched this video, I immediately said, not going to happen on Web 2. Even if I had never looked into ICP when I watched this video, if I watch this video, my next step is, okay, either he's completely full of shit, which is not really common of Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt is notorious for just laying out the future years before it actually happens, laying out pretty accurately too. And what he's saying aligns with so many things that other tech CEOs are saying. So there's a lot of corroborated takes across the rest of the tech space. And I would have gone away from this talk saying, I got to go find whatever the thing I'm missing, because it looks like AI is going to have certain capabilities that it's not going to be able to use on Web 2 because there's too many problems on Web 2. So I need to go look for whatever solution somebody's creating to create a better framework for AI. Even if I had never looked into ICP, that would have been my takeaway after this video. Because before I didn't even get to the end of the video. I just heard him talking. I said, nope, no chance. It's not possible. The example that he used, it was just clear that that just was not going to work. But the thesis was already in place. But when I was going through this, I was like, there's too many problems with complexity, access and permissions, the cybersecurity stack. You just omitted that like it's an irrelevant detail. What about app stores? You're talking about launching this app and it going viral. Where are you going to launch this app? You're just omitting so many different steps as it relates to deploying applications on the web, different updates, ongoing updates and changes to the application. You just omit all of that. And all of these are problems. And so it just didn't make sense to me, but it started making more sense to me when I started looking into this functionality on ICP. So now we're talking about, now we're going back to the whole concept of when you have a thesis and it's already in place, and then after it's already in place, things start happening that align with that thesis. Because this is all going back to what I'm watching is everything aligning in ways that I could never imagine. But what I'm seeing in so many takes all over social media is the exact opposite. And I just think people are looking in the wrong direction, have no real thesis or direction about where this is going, and haven't really made a good use of their time in recent months and years as it relates to their own personal research and education. The longer the central elements of a theory hold, the more observations it predicts, the more tests it passes, the more facts it explains, the stronger the theory. So when it comes to the more facts it explains, when I see things like this happen, and then I make the assessment, it's not going to work on Web 2. And then I start seeing tons of corroborated evidence and or takes, studies, different analysis from institutions that further confirm my assessment here, not going to work on Web 2. Then I start going, this is from 2 weeks ago. What gives IT leaders pause is they look to integrate agentic AI with legacy infrastructure, right? All the articles I've already shown. I see tons and tons of feedback in the institutional space further suggesting that, yeah, this functionality is not ideal for Web 2, right? And so it's not just one problem. The point that I'm making is that the alignment here is so perfect. It fits like a glove, almost to the point to where, is this all just a coincidence? You kind of have to step back and say, so there's tons of problems that need solutions. There's one thing in the entire world that fits perfectly for all of these problems, has specific solutions for all of these different problems. This alignment is just, it strengthens the theory. The fact that ICP has solutions for all these very specific problems strengthens the theory, because the theory of ICP being the hub for Web3 aligns with all of this. It aligns with everything for the most part. So the problems on Web 2, complexity across systems, within systems, application code, and these are all different problems. That's what people need to understand. These are all different Web 2 problems. Solving for one of these problems does not mean that you solve for all of them. But ICP solves for all in one full stack solution, which is insane. Once you really understand the depth of these problems, and especially at scale. So cybercrime, payment system, identity system, ownership, verifiability / auditable, guardrails, governance, and it's an open ecosystem. No walled gardens, no app stores, launching on, having issues with launching on a competitor's network, like all that's, it's an open framework, right? And so different problems across the board. And it just so happens that ICP has solutions for all of these problems. And I don't see anything else that even solves for one or two of these problems. And so given that the thesis was already in place before this talk ever happened, before I knew, you knew, before any of us knew the timeline on when AI models were going to be able to write more sophisticated types of applications and be able to actually build full web applications and deploy them on the web, before we knew any of that and before this happened, the thesis was already in place. And then this drops, okay? And then we get the additional information on new functionality coming with AI. And then all the problems start being highlighted on Web 2 throughout tons and tons and tons of institutional sources. surveys, studies. And then you go look at how this aligns with ICP's functionality, and it fits like a fucking glove. And so there's way too much alignment here. The ICP thesis explains how these problems are going to be solved for, explains how this type of functionality is going to be possible, just not on Web 2 because there's too many fucking problems. And so the ICP thesis explains way too many things, most everything in all reality. So the expected problems are well documented across numerous institutional surveys and studies. And a lot of these are recent. A lot of these have all come out after Schmidt gave this talk, after we started this conversation. And I dug in to everything with ICP and figured out that there were perfect solutions for all these problems. This was all after the fact, all right? Many coming out after the fact. The ideal solutions just happen to be native to ICP when there's no other solutions anywhere out there across the board with so many different types of problems and solutions. This isn't even all of them, but these are all different problems. All of them. And so what we're talking about is events that are happening in the new input, right? So this is an ongoing, never-ending analysis process. That's how you should look at this. You're trying to solve an equation and you have a lot of it already in place and you're getting new data that helps you better make sense of everything. And based on the incoming data, you might have to alter certain things with your analysis. Change your outlook on different things. But so the events that are happening are corroborating all the other data in the broader thesis. And just shortly after the smart city announcement comes out with Cambodia signing a letter of intent, further aligning with the broader thesis. Okay. Yeah, it's not just one problem. And the fact that ICP fits like a glove, in my personal opinion, goes back to the whole concept of the more facts and the more things that the thesis or theory explains, the stronger the theory. The longer it holds, the stronger the theory. And the only two responses from the other side of the conversation, which there's not much of a other side of the conversation, is just price and what everybody is saying. And that's been a constant ever since. It's not changed. Everything else is what's been changing. And so the whole thought experiment, what I was trying to do there is just do a thought experiment about, let's just say the ICP thesis wasn't in place at this point in time. Once you hear this, it's like I would have gone looking for a solution. And had I not figured out ICP up until that point, after I listened to Schmidt, I would have probably gone and found ICP after that. But if the alignment wasn't nearly perfect, with nothing else in sight that even scratches the surface of solving for all of these problems, I can't find anything else that even realistically solves for 2 or 3 of these problems in one solution. And ICP solves for more problems than just, because this is just really with AI. Okay, there's a lot of other Web 2 related problems on top of this. Some overlap. But yeah, if the alignment wasn't so perfect, I would view this differently. But there are only so many outcomes generally with all this tech. It's either going to move forward or it's not going to move forward, right? And so it's not like there's a million different outcomes here. Either this tech is going to go forward or it's not. Period. Hard stop. So I would start like rolling back your analysis process and just trying to look at this like just in some ways, not all, but in some ways in a very black and white way, like, do I believe the tech is going to move forward or not? And start with that. And why do you think the tech is going to move forward? What type of case can you make for the tech moving forward? And then, okay, if you determine you think it's most likely that the tech is going to move forward, we'll then start looking at the tech in this space. And where does your confidence lie based on all the tech in this space? Mine lies with ICP because I've compared it to the field. I've compared it to all these other technologies. And it's the one thing that solves for the most problems. And it solves for almost every single problem. And it just happens to fit like a glove with all the current problems that are being broadcasted right now in the institutional space. About problems that are being broadcasted about one of the biggest opportunities in the whole world, the tech of the future. Do you see blockchain moving forward in some way? If so, why? Do you see other technologies that have a better value proposition? I don't. And there's only two frameworks on Earth. And this is another thing that people undersell, even in the ICP space. Guys, a lot of people in the ICP space, even people that have been here for a while, don't have very strong conviction. That just doesn't come out until we get in situations like this. That's why I kind of like situations like this, because it separates the people that have conviction and the people that have something to say and the people who don't. So I love this type of environment for me personally. But only two frameworks on Earth, man. AI for AI on the web, ICP and Web 2. These are the only two frameworks on Earth. There's not a third that I can find at this point in time. Yeah. No other existing tech in this space can even serve as a third option at this point. So it's ICP and it's Web 2. And when DeepSeek, one of the biggest talks of AI all over the world, was a trending story for a month, for an entire month, one of the two frameworks, initial frameworks on their GitHub was a project Panda on ICP. The team checks out at dfinity. The timeline checks out. The corroborated events and everything that I'm seeing, everything, it all checks out. It all aligns. There's so much alignment here. It's insane. And the public completely being in the dark, that also aligns. I would expect that. I would expect the public to be completely in the dark and almost nobody to see this in a situation like this right now with ICP being in single digits. So the fact that the public's completely in the dark and nobody sees this isn't a deterrent for me. I would expect to see that in an environment like this, especially in an environment like this where I've personally assessed that there's an agenda to kind of misdirect people when it comes to the biggest opportunities in this space, using certain mediums that can push their attention and focus in certain directions and not others. Where are the other solutions here? Where are they at? I can't find them. I've looked. I've done a lot of research just into other solutions that I didn't think on surface level were comparable to ICP, but just to do my due diligence, I dug into them deeper and I was like, yeah, there's nothing else out there like this right now. That doesn't mean something else won't come along, and doesn't even mean that that makes it a definitive thing that ICP is going to move forward and succeed. It's just if I'm going to look at this, I'm going to try to approach this in a scientific, analytical way and have a process and a framework that I follow and assess as many different variables as I can. So, yeah, the public completely being in the dark, that aligns with what I would expect to see. World Computer Day at Davos, that aligns with what I would expect to see. The sit down with Ross Perot Jr., billionaire, I would expect to see that, and Kimball Musk. The institutional developments that have happened, things like smart city infrastructure with Cambodia, all of these things are aligning. The bearish takes in the ecosystem have no real substance. And if you actually look at them, you can see they have no real substance. It's mostly just about price, and or nobody's talking about it, so nobody cares. These are the people that think that, like CEOs of private corporations that have everything in the world to lose and are under more NDAs than anybody else on earth, that they are just going to come out and broadcast certain things just to inform the average person. It's not going to happen. They put more than enough information out on the web for people to figure this out. More than enough. Shocked at how much information they put out on the web. And all the bearish takes in the ICP ecosystem, guys, none of these people ever tried to refute the case that I'm making because they can't. So they just skip over the very thorough case that I've made over a 3-year period, over tons and tons and tons of videos, over so many different topics, showing so many sources to back up what I'm saying from the institutional space about numerous topics too. They don't even try to refute the case that I'm making. They just skip right over that and just, oh, price is down, so dfinity needs to do something, or they need to release caffeine AI, or so on and so forth. There's no substance to any of these takes. Think about the need for AI infrastructure, guys. You're hearing a lot about that, right? We need AI. We need to invest in AI infrastructure. That aligns with everything else that's happening. Trump and Elon being in the new administration, that also aligns with this broader transitionary process. The need for a better credential system and a better identity system that's happening right now. I just read over that article the other day. That also aligns with everything. Everything is aligning. Now, let's get to weighted decision analysis. And basically, the point that I'm trying to get to here is that this is a very broad analysis process to do this entire situation if you're trying to have any clarity on what's going on. And there are certain variables and criteria that are more important than others. And if you don't accurately categorize things based on their overall importance, you'll probably just have a skewed perception on what's going on. So the problem is accurately identifying the most important variables and trends in a very, very broad analysis. And the solution would be use weighted decision analysis to categorize variables based on overall importance to the broader equation. So when the weighted decision analysis, and you can look this, I just wanted to find an actual term to describe what I was trying to say. The real point that I'm trying to make here is that in this entire evaluation process, there are certain things that are overwhelmingly more important than others. And if you don't accurately weight the things that need to be weighted as overwhelmingly more important than others, you're going to be lost. I don't know what else to tell you. Yeah, because objectively, by every single metric, AI, cybercrime, the problems of Web 2 and the problems of the legacy fiat system, this entire aspect of this equation is overwhelmingly more important than almost everything else happening. But if you pretty much negate this entire thing and just whatever new scary thing pops up on your feed, you just ignore this entire blue part and just say, scary thing on my feed, everybody panic, dfinity do something, then you're just going to be lost and hysterical and running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Chicken Little syndrome. That's what's going to happen because you did not accurately identify the most important variables and you did not weight them accordingly based on all the other things that were happening. But this goes back to the medium people are using to access information. And I want to just go over a couple terms here. Social learning theory is a theory of social behavior that proposes that new behaviors can be acquired by observing and imitating others. So going back to the medium people are using, right? People are just seeing everything that's happening on their feed and hearing the conversation about crypto. And a lot of times this will have an effect on people's perception. And I think that it very much is on X. And people don't have the humility to assume there might be a chance that their perception's been altered based on the medium itself. But all you have to do is draw the parallel with what happens when people watch mainstream media all the time and how that affects their perception and make that same parallel here. Nobody is above being deceived or misled by propaganda. Happens to all of us. Happens to me, happens to you, I'm sure. A lot of times we don't see it until like in hindsight. But also environmental psychology. So this works to understand how people sense, perceive, and remember various places they encounter. Where we are affects how we think, feel, behave, whether it's a natural setting like a park or a beach, or a built environment like easy urban care. And then neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change and adapt due to experience. It is an umbrella term referring to the brain's ability to change, reorganize, and grow neural networks. This can involve functional changes due to brain damage or structural changes due to learning. But when you're talking about the environment that we're in, just think about the same person being dropped in two drastically different environments and the psychological impact and the impact that's going to have on their behavior and the way that they perceive different things. Like, let's just say you're 20 years old and you're going to be dropped in military boot camp and you're going to go into the military for the next 4 years. As opposed to that, in some alternate reality, at that exact same age, you were dropped at McDonald's, nothing against working at McDonald's, but you worked at McDonald's for the next 4 years around a bunch of low people that weren't really interested in doing a good job or working hard or so on and so forth. And you just think about over time how the environment would shape the way that you behave, see things, act, interact with other people, right? Don't underestimate the medium that you're using to get information, because it's very likely that it's having a big impact on the way that you perceive everything going on in the crypto space because of the medium you're using. But the back to the earlier part of the conversation, the alignment with so many things happening with ICP is crazy. It truly fits like a glove when it comes to the solutions ICP has to offer and the problems that are currently being broadcasted all over the place about AI on Web 2. The alignment is just too perfect. Okay, now I just want to go over another thing too, because this is going to be a longer process just because of the nature of implementation processes with technology and with software. Okay. Now, if you were to look into, and I've mentioned this before, but it's been a while, and I like to mention this from time to time because I want to relay accurate, realistic information about timeline here, so people don't get wrong expectations or set their expectations somewhere that's not realistic. So the average ERP is just the main accounting system that most corporations use. But if you were to look at the implementation process itself, so a small business, if you're going to be implementing a new ERP system, so you already have one in place, but for whatever reason, you're going to switch providers and you're going to adopt a new ERP system. For small businesses, that would take roughly 3 or 4 months. For larger businesses, a year to a year and a half. For multinational businesses, 1 to 3 years. That's one corporation, one system. Okay? So now extrapolate out. Imagine all corporations all over the world migrating to new software systems. Think about the magnitude of something like that. And that's what we're discussing. And so if one large business to implement a new system is going to take 12 to 18 months, and it does. I'm speaking from experience here. I never sold ERPs, but I sold similar types of systems. That's how long it takes just for one corporation to implement one new enterprise system. So that gives you an idea of the timeline that we're on. And I say that because not everything is going to be ready with ICP like today. ICP can't onboard the entire world's population right now today. And certain use cases will make more sense in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, right? Over time, ideally, capacity grows and ICP can support larger and larger AI models. But this is going to be a lengthy process. That's good because ICP can't support everything today anyways. But certain use cases are ideal right now, and I went over those the other day. And from a technical perspective, for the use cases that I went over the other day, payment system, identity system, Bitcoin scaling solution, smaller AI models, backup for IT, sensitive data, just data in general, Ethereum scaling solution, and 1 or 2 others. Those use cases, ICP is the best technical solution on earth by a very wide margin. But over time, in 2 years, you'll be able to add more use cases to that list. But just understand there is a process here, and this is going to take time. And not every use case will make sense for ICP today. All right. But more things, more alignment. Okay. This was 2 days ago. Almost 1 million businesses and home PCs compromised after users visited illegal streaming sites. Microsoft. So this was 2 weeks ago. And this was put out by a Cisco company. Why AI needs a new kind of internet, the case for open infrastructure. This is no longer theoretical. It's happening now, but our infrastructure isn't ready. Today, companies might have one AI assistant writing code, another reviewing security, and a third optimizing performance. But these systems operate in isolation. Everything I'm seeing is aligning. Everything. And these are all new things. This is all new incoming data. I mean, that's what I'm doing here. I'm assessing this like it's a never-ending analysis and equation that I'm trying to solve for, and just continually taking in new data. And all of this new data has been aligning with the broader thesis in ways that I'm even blown away by. Because all of this was in place. Eric had already created this before we even really started the AI conversation. It just so happens that after the fact, once this AI conversation starts, that all the problems of Web 2, ICP has solutions for, and they all just happen to fit like a glove perfectly. And if you even go into back to so number 3, application code, application data being separate, that's a very big problem on Web 2 as it relates to autonomous AI applications on the web. There's a lot of other problems, but this is a big one. And guys, dfinity was putting out stuff about orthogonal persistence back in like 2021 or earlier, meaning they already had solutions in place for problems that weren't even being articulated yet. ChatGPT wasn't even out back in earlier 2021. I think it came out in 2022, right? So ChatGPT, not that AI was still a thing, but ChatGPT dropping on the web was like the big introduction to the rest of the world about artificial intelligence and its capabilities. But ICP already had a solution for application code, application data being separate for autonomous AI applications long before ChatGPT ever hit the web. There's just way too much alignment here, all over the place. And it's only, everything is just aligning. I don't know how else to put that. But if you didn't have a thesis, if you're not using a framework, if you're just kind of tuning in to the medium, to X, and just scrolling through the feed, you might see a very different situation because your attention might be directed in the wrong places. The medium might be affecting your perception. It's worth considering because everything I'm seeing is the stars are aligning in every imaginable way, more so than I could have ever imagined. I think it's the most bullish, optimistic setup in the history of the world. And even if you go listen to these gentlemen, the things that they say align with the new system. The way they describe the future of AI on the web align with the new system. Suleiman, the CEO of Microsoft AI, just talks about how this is going to be an interactive experience with artificial intelligence. Mark Zuckerberg talking about the need for an open ecosystem, right? An open ecosystem. We need a new kind of internet, open infrastructure. Exactly what Mark Zuckerberg was talking about in this interview, where he was talking about billions of AI agents, right? The longer the central elements of a theory hold, the more observations it predicts, the more tests it passes, and the more facts it explains, the stronger the theory. And everything I'm seeing, and it's on an ongoing basis, everything I'm seeing aligns with the thesis. So, but depending on how you're getting information, depending on how you're spending your time and your input, see, so much of my input has nothing to do with X because so much of my input is just isolated, like specific research that I'm targeting certain things to learn more about. Yeah. Like all of my input would be research, independent research on all of these problems. Yeah, I still see random shit show up in my feed on X, just random garbage. But in my own free time, I'm doing deep independent research on all of these different problems and how ICP can solve for these problems. So that's really all I have for this video. I just want people to consider that your perception and outlook might be getting shaped by the media outlets or the social media platforms that you're using to access certain information. And I highly recommend doing, unplugging and getting your own like independent research done to where you can tune out the noise and it's just you pursuing certain specific information for a very specific reason. All right. Guys, that's all I have for this video. This was not financial advice. This is the most optimistic, bullish setup I could ever imagine. And everything I'm seeing is just further aligning with all this tech moving forward. I don't see any other way. And until something else shows up that can solve for all these problems, like ICP can, then I'm just going to continue moving forward with the thesis because it aligns with everything else that's happening. The two things that don't align, price and what everybody is saying, those have been the same the entire time. Those have been constants. as everything else has been changing. Everything else has been changing, including here recently, the biggest name in tech coming out and saying we need to make cybercrime a national security threat. Months after Dom said this might be considered a national security threat at some point in the future. So it's further alignment when Dom says that about a problem that ICP solves for. And then months later, the biggest name in tech comes out and says, yeah, this should be considered a national security threat. Here's all the reasons why. We did all the work for you. Here you go. That's further aligning with the broader thesis. It's more corroborated evidence that things are moving in the direction that you would want to see them go if all this tech was going to move forward. If they were underselling the problem, if they were saying, oh, guys, there's no big deal, everything's going to be fine, nothing to worry about here, it would be a different conversation. But that's not happening. They're coming out sounding the alarm, saying national security threat. Here's all the work. Here's the reasons why. And so everything's just further aligning. Yep. That's all I got. Not financial advice. Do your own research. Take care. Have a good day. I'll see you next video.